This is a memory from my childhood. My family lived in the countryside, and whenever harvest season came around, the hills behind our house would be covered with mushrooms ready to be picked. When I was little, my grandfather would tell me where to find them, and the two of us would go picking together. After I started middle school, I would sometimes go alone, and other times with friends. It happened on a Sunday during harvest season. A friend and I went to the hills behind our house to pick mushrooms. Things went smoothly at first. We picked a lot, and just as we were getting ready to head back, my friend suddenly let out a scream and fell to the ground. The back mountain was overgrown with trees and weeds, and it was common to get your feet cut by branches. So at first I thought he'd cut his foot. But when I turned to look at him, I saw that he was staring fixedly at the top of a tree. I followed his gaze and was shocked to see the bodies hanging there. I was absolutely terrified. I cowled and even make a sound. I instinctively backed away, completely overcome by panic. When I finally managed to pull myself together, I took a closer look and realized they weren't real people at all, but mannequins. That prank was way too much. My friend and I cursed under our breath as we hurried down the mountain. When we got home, we told my father about it over lunch. After hearing the story, he said we had to get rid of those prank items so they wouldn't scare other hikers. So the three of us grabbed a tripod, an axe, and some pruning shears and headed back up the mountain to clean up the mess. When we reached the spot, we could see the two mannequins still hanging there from a distance. As we approached, my father set up the ladder while my friend and I held it steady from below. He quickly climbed up, cut the rope around the neck, and tossed the mannequins down. The three of us carried them back to the shed at home. But then we realized that if we left the mannequins in the shed, it could be trouble if a passerby saw them and mistook them for real people. To avoid any misunderstandings, I stripped one of the mannequins of its clothes. The moment the clothes came off, I broke out in a cold sweat, and a wave of intense unease washed over me, because I discovered that on the mannequin's stomach, written in red paint, were several large characters: "Whoever puts this mannequin down will die." Seeing this, we all froze. My father quickly stripped the other mannequin of its clothes as well, and there, too, were several large characters: "Whoever puts this mannequin down, their most beloved will die." For a moment, my friends and I were too scared to speak, our hearts filled with fear and dread as we wondered what kind of curse this could be. We were truly terrified. My father quickly reassured us, saying, "Go buy some juice. I'll handle this here." Later, while we were out buying juice, my father carried the two mannequins out of the warehouse, smashed them to pieces, and threw them away completely. From then on, the incident became a taboo subject among my friend, my father, and me. Although it wasn't a supernatural event or anything particularly terrifying, none of us dared to mention those two mannequins again. I don't know if it was really a curse or just a prank, but whenever I recall the words on the mannequin, "The person you love most will die," if something like that were to actually happen, it would surely be the most agonizing thing imaginable. I managed to get into a taxi. I lined up behind the man. After a while, a black taxi pulled up. It picked up the middle-aged woman first. Great. Just two more cars and I could head home. After the first taxi drove off, I waited about 15 minutes. Then the rolling metal shutter on the station stairs slammed shut with a loud bang. I turned around and saw the station staff checking the lights as they walked into the office. I pulled out my phone and texted my boyfriend, letting him know I was waiting for a taxi in front of the station. I told him I'd take a car to the parking lot of the Sominas and Winchsa factory and then walk the rest of the way, so I should be home in about half an hour. After I sent the message, another taxi arrived. That mail office worker got in. Once he was inside, he glanced back at me through the window. He looked like a handsome man with sharp, well-defined features. As I watched the taxi pull farther and farther away from the station, I suddenly realized there had been nearly 20 minutes between this one and the previous taxi, much longer than usual. Normally a taxi came every 5 minutes or so. Besides, the first one had been black, and so was this one. Maybe it was Saturday and fewer drivers were working. Or maybe it was the exact same taxi. While I stood there thinking, another 20 minutes or so passed before a taxi finally appeared. It was black again. Just as I suspected, it was the same car. It seemed there was only one taxi running today. I got in and told the driver, "Please go to the parking lot of the So factory on Suchmanis Road." Since that factory was a local landmark, mentioning its parking lot usually told the driver exactly where to go, but the place where I lived was actually right next to a dimly lit, the Arrow Road. You just had to cut through the small alley next to the factory's parking lot to reach it. Cars cowled and enter that alley. I glanced at the street view outside. At that moment, the driver struck up a conversation. "Still working on a Saturday? You really work hard. Night shift?" I was exhausted and found his chatter annoying, so I answered vaguely, "Yeah, it's all right." The driver told me we were almost at the factory parking lot. The taxi slowed down and came to a stop. Just as I pulled out the fare from my wallet, he suddenly asked, "Miss, do you work at this factory?" I thought to myself, this driver is really nosy. What does he want? I forced myself to reply, No, I don't." The moment I finished speaking, the driver immediately started the car again and drove straight past the factory parking lot. I quickly said, "Sir, I need to get off." The driver kept going and answered while driving, "Miss, you also took a taxi on Tuesday, right?" He showed no intention of stopping and continued speeding forward. I was so startled by his strange question and refusal to stop that I froze in place. A minute passed like that. I was extremely nervous, with no idea what he was trying to do. I stared at the street view outside the window. The taxi was heading toward a remote, deserted area. Suddenly, the taxi made a sharp turn and drove into an alley within a residential district. There was a convenience store there. He pulled into the store's parking lot and stopped. After parking, the driver turned around and said to me, "Miss, I'm very sorry. This is for you." He took out a business card and handed it to me. Then he told me that the company's phone number and his name were on it. The driver continued, "If you want to file a complaint, just call the company and give them my name. It's all on the card." I found the whole thing baffling. He had driven me to this strange place only to tell me I could report him. Then he went on, "Actually, I was the taxi driver who picked you up on Tuesday. I didn't realize it at first. It was only when I saw the sign for that factory that I remembered it driven a female passenger there on Tuesday as well. I never expected it to be you. The real reason I suddenly drove away from there just now is because the male passenger before you also got off at the exact spot you mentioned. While he was in the car, he was on his phone the whole time. I overheard him say to whoever was on the other end, 'The So factory parking lot, right?' Then he told me to drop him off at the factory parking lot. On the way, I heard him keep talking, saying things like, 'He'll be there in just a few minutes. There are 5 of us, we'll take care of it for you.' After that, he made another call, telling the person to meet him at the factory parking lot. By the time the driver reached this point, I still had no idea what was happening. Confused, I asked, 'Then why did you drive me here?' He replied, 'Actually, just as we were approaching the factory parking lot, I noticed the lights in the office building were all off. So that male passenger definitely wasn't an employee there either. The moment I started feeling something was off, I spotted an extra van parked on the side of the road across from the parking lot. When my headlights swept over it, I saw about 4 men standing there. As soon as they saw the lights, they themselves. That kind of behavior is suspicious enough, right? Most importantly, I saw that the person sitting in the driver's seat of that van was definitely the male passenger who had just gotten out of my taxi. At that moment, I suddenly remembered the content of the phone call that male passenger had made in the car, and I felt like something was wrong. What if something had happened to you after you got out at the factory parking lot? So I hurriedly drove away from there. After hearing the driver finish his story, I was stunned. I wondered why someone would target me. A terrifying memory flashed through my mind. I remembered that just now, in front of the station, I had used my phone to send a text to my boyfriend saying that I was waiting for a taxi in front of the station, that I would take a car to the Somaneso factory later and then walk back, and that I should be home in about half an hour. Besides my boyfriend, no one else knew where I would be getting off. Also, I remembered the message my boyfriend had sent me while I was on the train: "Don't go home too late. Be careful taking the train." How did he know I was on the train? Just as I was feeling terrified, my phone rang. I saw a message from my boyfriend asking, "Where are you?" This is a story I experienced in the early 1990s when I was attending university in Michigan, USA. In American universities, professors would always require students to write project reports, and of course they had to be done on a computer. The university I attended at the time had several computer labs, each equipped with around 50 computers. Many students would stay up all night typing their reports in those rooms. That day, I had been busy looking up information in the library and then writing my report. After dinner, I carried the materials I had found back from the library to my dorm. Library and then writing my report. After dinner, I carried the materials I had found back from the library to my dorm. I walked into one of the computer labs and sat down in front of a computer to type up my report. Back then, my days followed the exact same dull routine, and I was bored out of my mind. All the computers in the lab were connected to the internet. Netscape was still the main browser at the time. Most web pages were just research findings posted by academics, nothing very interesting. Because of how slow the internet was in those days, websites were incredibly basic, usually nothing more than a few tiny, low-resolution pictures and blocks of plain text. Search engines hadn't really taken off yet either, so people mostly shared website addresses by word of mouth. That night I worked on my report for a while as usual. Then I happened to notice a URL scribbled in pencil on the surface of the computer desk. I stared at the mysterious address and figured it was probably some student's personal webpage. I thought I could use a break to clear my head, so I typed the URL into the browser. After a moment, the page loaded. What appeared on the screen was unbelievable. There was a photograph of a man lying on the floor in a dimly lit room, his body covered in blood. The gruesome image hit me like a punch. I started shaking uncontrollably and felt sick to my stomach. I forced myself to look closer. Below the photo was a single sentence in English: "A guy in Michigan, around 30 years old, was killed by me today." At a glance it was obvious this was a website where a murderer was proudly displaying their crime. Convinced I had stumbled onto something horrifying and enormous, I bolted out of the computer lab and ran straight back to my dorm. I was so terrified that the next day I didn't dare leave my room. The next morning, I went to the computer lab again to confirm that yesterday's website wasn't an illusion. I typed in that URL once more. After the webpage opened, a photo of the same dimly lit room appeared, but this time, lying face up on the floor was a woman, and a knife was stuck in her chest. Blood was flowing from her mouth, nose, and ears. Just like before, there was a sentence written in English below the photo, which read: "A bitch in Michigan, around 30 years old, was killed by me today." I was scared to death when I saw it and immediately ran to the university police department to tell the police about the matter. However, at that time, the internet hadn't become mainstream at all. Even if I said things like a murderer uploaded photos of their victims on the internet, it was very hard for people to understand. Moreover, to my shame, my rough language skills at the time also became a stumbling block, so I completely failed to get the police to take me seriously. After leaving the police station, I returned to the computer lab once again with a peculiar state of mind where fear and curiosity coexisted, and typed in the URL of that webpage again. As a result, I found that the photo of the woman that was there just a few hours ago was gone. In its place, my dorm address and phone number were written on the webpage, and below that was a sentence left in English saying, "You are the next star of my webpage." After seeing this, I lost my mind with fear. I didn't even turn off the computer and quickly ran back to my dorm. I didn't pack anything. I just gave all my belongings directly to my friends. Then, 2 days later, I left the United States and fled back to Japan. When I was a child, something happened that I never expected. Back in elementary school, the road to and from school was a narrow country lane running between fields. In that rural area, all you could see were endless stretches of farmland dotted with a few scattered houses. Along the way stood an anatomical model factory. It seemed completely abandoned. In all my memories, I never once saw anyone going in or out. Through the wire fence, you could glimpse a corner of the empty lot where a pile of broken anatomical model parts lay scattered. At the time, the place felt strangely adventurous and a little intriguing, yet also deeply creepy. The factory was surrounded by a wide ditch filled with murky, disgusting sewage that gave off a terrible stench, with all kinds of random garbage floating on the surface. One day on my way home from school, I decided to have a little adventure and walked around to the back of the factory by myself. The condition of the ditch behind the factory was far worse than the side facing the road. It was horrifully filthy, littered everywhere with garbage and shattered unknown objects. But that was where I found Ite, a female anatomical model heft in the pile of trash, her upper body exposed. Its pale, finely featured face left a strong impression on me. Staring at the model, I thought if I could pull out such a good-meanest-looking anatomical model, clean it up, and show it to my friends, they would definitely be amazed by me. Even though that idea excited me, the water was far too dirty, and the model sat deep in the back of the ditch. It would be extremely difficult to wade through all the debris, weeds, and mounds of garbage to reach it. But at the time, I didn't want anyone else to know about the existence of that mannequin. Since I couldn't have it, I didn't want anyone else to have it either. So I kept my discovery completely to myself. For a while after that, the one thing I made sure to do every single day was to go and check on the mannequin's condition. As the days passed, I watched it grow more and more dilapidated. After just a few days, its color began to change. The once fair skin turned filthy. Soon its hair started falling out in clumps. The skin lost all its luster, turning dull and black, covered in pockmarks and what looked like rat bite marks. I sighed, thinking how every beautiful thing eventually loses its radiance with the passage of time. Seeing it like that, I completely lost interest. The next time I went back, it had already been swallowed by the floating garbage. Most of its body had sunk into the sewage, almost invisible, while the part still above the water was hideously swollen from soaking up filthy water. It had become nothing more than ditch trash. A long time went by before I looked one last time, but its figure was gone. After I graduated from elementary school, I never walked that path again, until recently, when I returned to my hometown during a holiday to visit my parents. On a whim, I rode my bicycle to all those childhood places, including the site where the old factory had stood. Everything had completely changed. Residential buildings were everywhere now, and the factory grounds had become a parking lot. I thought of that mannequin with a deep, lingering melancholy. However, it suddenly hit me that this childhood incident was actually spine-chilling. After growing up and learning about human anatomy along with seeing all kinds of disturbing photos, I couldn't shake off one terrifying thought. Would a plastic mannequin decay like that? Would a mannequin swell up after soaking in water? Was that rotting process actually what happens to a human body when it decomposes? Staring at the parking lot now, where the old factory grounds had become nothing but asphalt, I no longer wanted to uncover the truth. Those once nostalgic memories had turned into something terrifying, something I could never speak of to anyone. A few years ago, the company transferred Mr. Sakaga to my workplace. He and I ended up living in the same employee dormitory. After some time, we became quite close. One evening while we were drinking and chatting, he suddenly asked, "Have you noticed? If you look out from the dorm window, there's a tall chimney. Do you know what it's for?" Although I didn't have much of an impression of it, I also lived in the dormitory. My room was quite far from his, so the view from his window wasn't necessarily the same as mine. Besides, I was still new to the area and didn't know the local geography well. So I casually replied that it might be the chimney of a bath ashore some factory. Mr. Sakaga didn't look too well when I said that, and we never brought up the topic again. About a month later, just as I was starting to forget the conversation, Mr. Sakaga was found dead in a residential area not far from the dormitory. The condition of his body was extremely gruesome. It appeared he had fallen from a great height. Strangely, there were no tall structures nearby from which someone could have fallen to their death. The whole area was composed of residential buildings no more than 3 stories high. The entire situation was bizarre and unsettling, but the police investigation found absolutely no evidence of foul play, so they ruled it an accidental death. To attend Mr. Sakaga's funeral, I traveled to his hometown, a coastal city in Kyushu. I rode in the car of one of his relatives. As we drove along the coastal highway toward his old home, a sudden sight caught my eye. In the old port area by the sea stood a gigantic chimney. According to his relative, the locals called it the ghost chimney. It had been built there long ago as a symbol of the city. An intuition struck me: could the chimney Mr. Sakaga had seen from his dorm window have been that very ghost chimney? Although it seemed baffling and impossible, lately I've begun to realize my intuition was right. Because ever since I returned from Mr. Sakaga's funeral, I don't know exactly when it started, but now when I look out from my dorm window, I can see a tall chimney standing in the distance. It looks very far away. I'm not sure if it's psychological or some kind of illusion, but it appears identical to the ghost chimney I saw in Mr. Sakaga's hometown. I just feel that the chimney appeared suddenly, only recently. I asked other colleagues if they had noticed the chimney in the distance, but I only received vague, hesitant answers. I really don't have the courage to go near that chimney to confirm it. Remembering how Mr. Sakaga seemed to have fallen to his death from a high place, I can't help but think that if he had fallen from the top of that chimney, it might explain the cause of his death. The thought fills me with an inexplicable sense of unease. Here, I am begging everyone, I hope if you look out your windows right now and can also see a tall, old chimney that you've never noticed before, please make sure to tell me. And everyone, please take care of yourselves.